Welcome back to Sunrise Daily. Well, yes, indeed, we will take a look at some developments in the country and beyond it a little bit in a moment. We've got two gentlemen joining us this morning. Professor Oke Ikechukwu is the Executive Director, Development Specs Academy. And sitting beside him is Dr. Mando Obani, who is a former Chairman, Section of Public Interest and Development, that's SPIDEL for the MBA, also former Second Vice President of the same body. Gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for coming on today.
Good morning. Yeah,
Let's start off internationally in Africa. I mean, all over most of the dailies reporting how different governments, different African governments in the country, in Africa, are responding to the coup in Gabon. Some of them sacking their military, as to ensuring that they have a tighter hold on governance so that they don't want any surprises whatsoever. So they say sit tight governors, I beg your pardon, sit tight leaders, sack military officers, and then this appears they want to sit tighter. And in fact, one of the dailies did say they were warning any disgruntled Nigerian army officer, please leave. And I wonder, will they stand up and say, okay, well, I'm disgruntled, I need to take it back? I just wonder. Well, Prof, what's your impression of how this seems to be a wave in some African countries now?
Well, it is an understandable concern by sitting governments. But the most important thing to note is that the coup is a response to some political and economic realities. And for a coup to occur, something has gone so bad that some people in uniform who ordinarily should be serving the constitution of their countries decided to take governance into it. We've seen that several times in the country, and in many cases, in our own country, and in many cases, military coups against sitting military government. 3 facts on the table. Fact number 1, no amount of warning or reshufflement can stop a coup, because actually coups are, in most cases, not carried out or sponsored from the top. Usually middle-level officers who will carry out the coup. They can appoint you as a general. I agree with you. If you think back to our own past, it wasn't Murtala who carried out his coup. It was younger officers, Joe Garba and the rest of them. They kept talking to him, and he said, look, if you're going to put me there, nobody should tell me what to do. So on the day the coup occurred, he was in London, and he flew in later. So it's always that kind of thing. If you also remember the coup that led to his death, it wasn't carried out, the executions. You remember General Bisala? The report, at least after the investigations, was that they were to have bombed the plane. But unfortunately, the man, one of the key big boys sponsoring or involved, the general, was on that flight. And that's what led to a lot of things going on. We're going around to what is going on in Africa. The presidents are not asking themselves what they can do to ensure that coup will be unattractive. They're thinking of preventing officers from removing them. And that's why there's a possibility that no matter what they do, the person you're putting there, as you reshuffle, who is telling you what's in his mind? He may have been waiting for 15 years. Now you've got him to watch your back, and he takes you out without warning. Colonel Mengistu, he was one who took out Emperor Haile Selassie in Ethiopia. He was his right-hand man. At a point, Haile Selassie was a prisoner in his own palace. People didn't know. Mengistu was running the country until he actually formally took over. So the warning, whether it's coming from the Nigerian army or the reshufflement of presidents of several African countries, there is nothing that will prevent a coup, except you're governing so well that if somebody announces your removal, the people will say you can't. That's the only protection presidents can have.
Wow. Well, Mr. Obani, MBA incidentally just finished the conference, and it was themed Getting It Right. And in our terms, there are some quarters, some people think, wait a minute, but yeah, they may have talked about getting it right, but they haven't been seen to be holding the government as accountable as many would expect. So that message appears tongue-in-cheek. And so they would have wanted a lot more decisive action, firmer stance, or body language from the MBA. What would you say to such people?
I'm sure you fall into that group of persons that would have wanted a more forceful reaction of MBA to some of the misgovernance going on. Yes, I also share that same sentiment, that the MBA is a very big body, and previous leadership have always held leadership of the country accountable and react when there is misgovernance. And people have come to respect and believe in MBA as a pressure group that should be able to put government, on check as to whether the present leadership has been doing all that. Well, some of the communiques, some of the press conferences most time also draw the attention of government to issue of insecurity, economic issues, unemployment, and then creating a conducive economic environment for people to operate, and then generally looking at the state of our judiciary, that we cannot get it right if we have a judiciary that is not functional, where issue of justice delivery is an issue. It takes average of 10, 15 years for you to have your matters resolved at the court, lower court, up to the Supreme Court, sometimes 20 years. And by the time the man who has gone to court gets what we call justice, he may have gotten to a point where he's so old, his business must have crumbled, which is probably the reason why he went to court in the first place and all that. So MBA most times have been addressing it, but times of type of leadership at times can also account for the method the leader or the president will adopt. There are those who are more forceful. There are those who want to make their point in a more forceful manner. There are those also who prefer probably using a conciliatory note, in addressing some of the issues they consider bad. I don't know whether you want me to comment about what is going on with the issue of coup all over the African continent. The point is that we must condemn military coup. The resurgence of military dictatorship in African continent is something that it should be worrisome. We know what, we were there before. We had the military, took over the continent, and how they even retarded the development of most of these countries. But what is causing the resurgence now is what leaders in African continent should sit down and say, look, what is the issue? Why are we having resurgence of? Because it came to a time where it became a taboo for you to plan any coup in African continent at the time. If you try it, people, the whole world will condemn. But why are we now having that resurgence? And why are people clapping for them from those countries that experience coup? So it then means that African leaders must sit down and say there must be something that is actually this cause. Are we the cause? Are we allowing a free, fair, credible electoral process in the continent?
Can African leaders who have been there for over 40, 50, 60 years ask themselves, are we the cause?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. That's why
He's saying that they should.
Yes, should.
Oh, okay.
Because they are the cause. Naturally, nobody will want military coup in any part of the world. Nobody, because we know they now limit your freedom of expression. They now, outlaw your constitution. They now, infringe on your right. You can't speak freely under any military dictatorship. And that's why it's condemnable. Now that these people are now doing it, that even the citizens are now clapping, singing and dancing, it doesn't mean that there is something that we are not doing right.
But is it just about the military coups? I mean, there are coups that are happening every day that are not military in nature. I mean, one of the papers talked about emperor governors, ad hoc administrators, collapse, grassroots governance in 238 local government areas. That points to the fact that it's not just about the military. It's also about those who have been elected. Are they governing as they should? What do you think about Prof?
There are two factors. What's the reaction of the people to the emperor governor? You see, we must disaggregate all of this. Right. If you announce a coup in the US today, anybody after listening will laugh. Well, allow that guy into the station. Come on, let's continue the game we are playing. And probably they walk in here, 5 of them, or 16 of them, and just 4 of us, and they say, hey, we've taken over. If we're Americans, we say, get out of here. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Right of consciousness. Until the concept of the state as impregnable becomes public consciousness in the name of the rule of law, everybody who is given a position will think he has become something other than the state.
That's right.
That's why somebody who you bought a gun or bought a uniform for will tell you he has taken over. It's like nurses walking out of the hospital with syringes. Look, we're going to take over the country. Or street sweepers carrying their broom. The level of national political citizenship consciousness has not gotten to the point where ownership of the government resides in the people rather than the people in office. Imagine that you announce that you've taken over as the Oni of Ife, or as the Obi of Onitsha, or as the Sultan of Sokoto, the initial conclusion would be that a madman is talking.
Yeah.
If it turns out he's being serious, people will chase him away. So now you have in the states, the governor, National Assembly, state assembly members elected to represent the people, traditional rulers, council of traditional rulers, local government chairmen, elders, stakeholders. And the governor takes a unilateral action and nothing happens. It speaks to not the arbitrariness of the governor only, but the level of political consciousness. That the ownership of the state is outsourced to an individual who is elected to serve. That's where the crisis is.
What does that then say? Because, I mean, the traditional institutions, which you've spoken about, it appears as though, what, we take that closer to heart than the democratic process, because there will be two different kind of reactions if certain things were to happen in those two areas.
I agree, but the more important thing I believe one should focus on is the fact that the concept of inviolability of that tool has become part of the environment, ecosystem. Now, you don't have that in most states. And that's the important thing. I rig an election, I become president, I become governor. Those I paid to rig elections are there with me. And so there's no ownership. Those who voted were either given money or paid to carry ballot boxes. So this is a renegade engagement of, if you like, criminals. So, and I've had to make the point in the past that the Nigerian state has progressively, without our intending it, assumed the profile of a criminal enterprise. When you talk about land ownership, those who own the choicest properties, how people get into office, and then in a couple of months they are billionaires, you see that happens without question. And that suggests the point I'm making.
Okay, Mr. Bani, that matter of where the lawyers come into play here, we started this conversation talking about the cause of coups, poverty, and bad governance.
That's right.
Now, the lawyers who know the law and who are supposed to defend and ensure that the law is interpreted and executed as it ought to be, sometimes themselves are like those who live in glass house and they are throwing stones. I mean, the NBA conference just ended, and the AGM turns out that even amongst the lawyers, they are fighting themselves. Coups are taking place amongst the lawyers themselves. And so how would they be in the fact that in a situation where their own house is not even together? They're not holding themselves accountable. They're not governing as they should, being exemplary. How would they be able to hold government accountable?
Yeah, well, the NBA is a small unit, of what the society represent. And I agree that those who live in glass houses should not throw stone. We have told you we're a very big pressure group in African continent. We should be able to look at governance generally, and if there is a misgovernance anywhere, we should be able to tell the government in power, you're not doing well. We're a pressure group, no doubt. And for us to play that role very effectively, then our house must be in order. I agree with you. In terms of even our electoral process, recruitment process, we must also be seen to be very fair and credible, so that if there is any flawed election at the national level, we come up and say, no, we come and see what we're doing in NBA. So I agree with you totally. But you see, a pressure group is different from individual lawyers. And that's why we're saying, look, most of us should not even sit as an armchair critic. We should also throw our hat into the rings and begin to participate in the process. If you want things to be changed, you cannot be at the background and most times, be criticizing. Can you go and see what you can do in order to change the situation of things? One of us, Olumide Akwata, has already indicated interest now to run for governorship in Edo State, and we all wish him well. He did well as an NBA president. Well, he was there. There were things he did that we consider very, highly rated. And we believe that if given the opportunity by the electorate in Edo State, that would be, a very significant change in terms of the narrative of that particular state. While Akpabio, also a lawyer, was the governor, you and I know. If there is any governor that almost some governors are trying to imitate today in terms of building infrastructures and all that, Akpabio was a lawyer and he did well. So many other lawyers also have done well while they elsewhere. So we, as a pressure group, we have issue. But individuals, we have actually shown some level of standing performances while in government.
I asked that question to come to the 8-point agenda of the president and what the lawyers, we do know lawyers of blessed memory, what's his name now, that could go out and go to court for the people.
Beautiful. That is a good.
Take the Constitution. May God bless you. Ganify me. Yes. No. I mean, that's the last one that many of us remember. That could take the Constitution and say, "Hello, Mr. Federal Government, or Madam Federal Government, as the case may be, or Madam State Government, you have messed up. You've breached the Constitution. This is what the Constitution says is the right of the people.
I agree.
And you're not following it to govern." See the 8-point agenda.
Yes.
Food security.
Yeah.
Ending poverty, economic growth and job creation, access to capital, improving security. The welfare of the people is the primary responsibility of government. Now, who would hold the government accountable on behalf of the people?
Beautiful. You know, the issue of those agenda, you've outlined, if you look at it, most of them fall within the socio-economic rights that is provided for even under the 1999 Constitution, Chapter 2 of that Constitution. For the same Chapter 2 that provided for those socio-economic rights, that makes the human right, to be something that is worth the while, now says it's not justiciable. We've debated it. We've seen what Indian courts have done with regards to that. But Nigerian courts are still sticking to it is not justiciable. You don't have a right to come to court. I raised an issue also as the former chairman of SPIDEL on the issue of local standby. Our judges, especially of the Federal High Court, are not helping, the issue of public interest litigation in Nigeria. You come to court, instead of looking at the message, they are looking at the messenger. They say, what is your status? That you have no local standard. Even when the Supreme Court of Nigeria have departed from the rigid position in Ibrahim Adesanya's case and say any individual and any lawyer, any taxpayer can come to court and insist on good governance, on respect of rule of law, on public interest cases. But those justices at the court of, Federal High Court, sometimes they delay a matter so that the matter does not become a live issue. They ask you, Mr. Obani, you can withdraw. You can see that this matter is no longer a live issue. Or they now rule that you have no local standard to have initiated the action. Because they start examining you, what is your local? Instead of what you have brought you to court, you are seeking for relief. That there is a misgovernance here, there is lack of rule of law here, there is issue of, infringement of fundamental right. They now look at you, that you have no right whatsoever. What have you suffered over and above every other citizen? So that is an issue. We must convey a conference, a national conference on this issue of local standard. I'm a public interest lawyer. I'm a public interest, and I'm very interested in making sure that we hold government accountable. With all this agenda that the current president has listed, we should be able to go to court and say, you made this promise to the people. You are not keeping to it. You are not respecting rule of law. Bawa is still in detention. MFL is still in detention. Meanwhile, part of your rule of law is your agenda. So
I thought there's a new charge against former CBN governor.
Yes, but for the fact that there was an order of court that has not been complied with, and we have a new AG now, and I know he's a very good gentleman. He will be able to advise the government appropriately. There was a court order that said that this man should have been released. That same day, they waited for him and took him back. When the court made an order that he should be. So I'm saying, if you are saying that this is your agenda, start by showing this. And I believe that this government will, with the new AG that is in power now.
Well, Prof, yes, they've lifted this agenda, 8 points. Former President Jonathan had his 7 points. Yar'Adua had, I think, 7 points as well. And they all had these points. Yes, the ministers are on board now to ensure that all of this trickle down, they make things happen. Plus, we also have the governors who have received loan and grants, 5 billion, expected to ensure that the people don't feel, at least reduce the economic crunch. But maybe you should tell us now, from what you've seen, what kind of impact do you see all of this having on the economy?
One would have expected this 8-point agenda to come up much earlier. This government has been in. Imagine the effect this would have had on Nigerians if at inauguration, alongside with the president's statement about subsidy, he went on to say, I am coming in as president with an 8-point agenda, and then he enumerates them. There will be excitement in the polity, etc. So it's coming a little later than it should, but it's good that it has come. The other point to make is that it's also following the pattern It has become the norm for more than 20 years now, where governments, national governments, no longer speak of national development plans, but of regime agenda. When you speak of a comprehensive national development plan, even the tiring of roads will not depend on whether I like Obani or not, but on the fact that if in the next, say, 15 years we tire X number of roads because of their economic value, we integrate so you're talking about national development, but before the expiration, you review and you go on. But here, governments don't even review budget performance. So that's it. So what you have in place of national development plans are, what you call activity plans for problem solving. That is it. On that basis, you look at those 8 points. Oh, where my body is itching, okay, I'll give you something to rub on it. Whereas I need a comprehensive health check. Now, looking at the 8 points, there is nothing like poverty. What's the word now?
As ending poverty.
You can't. Yeah, there are countries where you can speak of having ended poverty, in that most people can deal with their basic needs. But I think they're speaking of poverty management and progressive eradication. So moving on to look at all of them, the agenda has come out. The thing is to make sure it delivers results. Okay. Food security is tied to national security. Part of the crisis of feeding today is that farmers have been out of business for more than 6 years because of banditry. Demand is higher than supply. Most places in the Northeast that used to supply certain kinds of food, re-desertification has taken place. The middle belt, the farmers are chased out by herders. So all of that crisis together. So having brought out the agenda, a few things should happen. Number one, the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Environment, and Minister of Water Resources should work together. So that if you want food and you're building dams, Ministry of Water Resources and Environment need to work with you for you to realize that when you build a dam, the volume of water going downstream will drop by more than 50%. The farmers and fishermen there will go out of job. So there has to be a comprehensive approach to all of that. And when you speak of rule of law, let them start, like you said, by establishing precedents. What this has done, whereas it's good that it has come out, it has also given the impression that the government wasn't really preparing. This election took place in February, wherein it was in May. And whether you like Tinubu or not, people around him are known for strategic engagement. Seriously. So one had thought that on being sworn in, with that announcement about that a lot of other things will roll out. And it takes us back to the observations of some people, maybe extreme, like Obaseki, about whether they were... Look at the subsidy, for instance. We could see there was really no program of alleviation when he came on. Then you look today, I think they say they are sharing, the money they are sharing is 23% less than this thing. Now, subsidy has been removed for 2.5 months. Yeah.
We're saving a lot more money.
Where is the money? That's the question. Nobody. The first time they said they got 400 billion.
I think they said some are also being saved in the excess crude account.
Let it be. It's public communication and credibility by talking to people. That's it. Imagine you're Nigerians, you now get a press release. We've saved in the last, because if you say you saved 400 billion in 4 weeks, that means in the next 4 weeks, you've saved another 400. Let's believe you. But we'll also remind you that the record of government expenditure on subsidy was more than 400 billion for 4 weeks. So, but that communication is not happening. Where is the money going? Just make it public, earn yourself credibility. This is what we've said. This is what part of it has been used for. This is where the rest of it is. It will make sense.
Ayo Buki.
Thank you, Chamberlain. Mr. Obani, I'd just like to follow up on Nyota's question about, the rule of law component in the 8-point agenda of Mr. President, the current administration. Even though you express optimism that the judiciary is a pressure group and would, make government accountable, it appears there's little hope in that regard when you consider, how most big names, the senior advocates of Nigeria, are the ones in the defense of politicians on curious cases of technicalities in the law courts. And then there is that, optimism yet again that the new Attorney General and Minister of Justice is a square peg in a square hole. But unless we've missed it, he has said little or nothing on the criticism about, the lack of compliance with due process in the case of the suspended CBN boss and the helmsman, suspended EFCC boss. Where's the hope that the judiciary, the NBA in this case, would indeed be the hope of the upholding of the rule of law of this administration?
Well, the issue of rule of law has always been our principal thing that we believe. We believe so much in ensuring that at any point in time, the rule of law should be upheld by any government that is in power. It's barely up to 2 weeks before, after this man, the new Attorney General has been appointed, and he's settling down. He was at a conference, and he made promises like, look, we should help him to succeed by advising where necessary and also giving him all the support that he needs in order to make success out of his position that he has just been appointed. I want to be optimistic that the issue of rule of law with this new man at the helm of affairs in the Ministry of Justice will be a different ballgame entirely. There is nothing wrong in being optimistic. Now, for the issue of NBA as a body, we must insist that things be done properly. We must insist that we must have an independent and autonomous judiciary that will be bold enough at every point in time to dispense justice to every man, every woman, irrespective of tribe, ethnicity, or status. We insist on it. It's a minimum requirement. If you are appointed a judge, you are expected to dispense justice. You don't look at somebody's pocket. You don't look at somebody's where he comes from. We insist on it. It has happened in some of African countries. They were now becoming like a model. We must model our judiciary like what has been happening in even the Rwanda that our governors are now going for training, and then the issue of even Kenya, and then Singapore. What did Singapore do? Or what did they do? What happened when they came into power and discovered that the judiciary had an issue of backlog of cases? The president then employed lawyers who were in practice and said, look, come and let us decongest the courts. Now, if you are interested in remaining in the bench after the entire process, you can remain. But if not, you can go back to your practice. And before you know it, Singapore, started on that note. And today, Singapore is one of the countries, most countries going to go and learn how to probably deal with quicker dispensation of justice. We have so many issues really bedeviling our judiciary. As I speak to you, a case you have can last up to 20 years. 20 years to, And I had expected that with the former vice president of the country being a professor of law, with somebody like a former governor of Lagos State in that particular government, and many lawyers, attorney general and all that were there in the last dispensation, that would have been something that would have been done with our judiciary in terms of justice delivery, timely justice delivery. We are still having issues that it takes average of 20 years for you to resolve issues that you have before the court. And it makes people to lose confidence. It's an issue we have to address. NBA has to address it. The judiciary has to address it. The government has to address it. And luckily for us now, we have a Senate president who is a lawyer. Bamidele Okoyemi, who is the majority, who is a leader in the House, is also a lawyer. I believe that this new government will have to do enough in order to really address this issue of justice delivery. It's an issue. You go to court, you waste all the time, all the years, and you don't get justice because of issue of not funding the judiciary, having enough personnel to deal with issues, and so many other issues. And even the Supreme Court, somebody has suggested, and it's pending before the National Assembly or before now, why can't we have regional Supreme Court? Not all cases from the state should end at the Supreme Court of Nigeria. They can end at the regional Supreme Court. We can have Southwest Supreme Court, Southeast Supreme Court, and even North Supreme Court. So there are cases from the state that should end there. Not all the cases must come to Supreme Court, only constitutional cases and some cases that has been enacted in law. But as I speak to you today, even customary matters go as far as going to Supreme Court. And today, you cannot get a date until 2026 or 27 in the Supreme Court of Nigeria. And meanwhile, you want those issues to be resolved at the judiciary, and you are not getting that particular justice delivered. So I think that now that we have a new government that say rule of law, they must look at this issue holistically, issue of looking at the Supreme Court of Nigeria, looking at the various high courts, looking at the various federal high courts, and see what we can do to ensure quicker justice dispensation. It's very critical so that we don't lose confidence and begin to take laws into our hand. That's
Mr.
my take concerning
Mr. Bani,
yes.
Beyond the administrative, aspect of, the legal work, there's also the concern about lawyers being involved in politics, and you've rightly noted, that one of your past NBA presidents is making a foray into politics, and there's also that concern that past NBA presidents have been less and less critical about government, particularly in recent times. But let's leave that part of the conversation. Let me come to you, Professor Okechukwu. One of the other components of the 8-point agenda of the administration is improving security. And we have with us now former governors being Minister of Defense and Ministers of State of Defense. It's come to our notice that the budget allocated to the military has more of the allocation going to infrastructure development rather than welfare and remuneration of the men of the force. Do you see these men, these ministers, weighing in, to commence any significant reforms that will see a transparent process in the budgeting of the military?
Yes, I do, but I'll take a slightly wider view. If they are ministers and their concern is to expand budget, they should be fired. Former governors are supposed to be chief security officers of their states, but the police commissioner is not under their command. So this is their chance to rethink the national security architecture from the angle of integration, inclusivity, and efficiency. And should also ensure that governors, when they hold security meetings, mandatorily involve the prison services or correctional services. Because you see, nations develop with data. It is from the prisons that you find what percentage of people are in prison because of armed robbery, because of clashes and the rest of it, and it enables you profile criminality, the level of convictions from the different places. Well, coming back to the question of the military, these are the things I believe, rightly or wrongly, that they should focus on. Number one, the Nigerian military is comprehensively overstretched because of the crisis, such that you see soldiers in the streets and at checkpoints doing what should be police work. And you ask yourself, how many soldiers, how many army personnel do we have in the country to warrant even one of them performing in the civilian arena? So that's a major crisis to be addressed at several levels, at the level of recruitment, at the level of personnel management, at the level of weapon efficiency and weapon variety. That's one. Two, you come to the matter of the crisis of terrorism, banditry, among other things. As ministers of defense, they must ask themselves, how is it that criminals could be embedded in a community and the traditional ruler does not know? Security must devolve and drill down to the fact that you know who is living with you. Remember the reported case some years back, I hope it's factually correct, of when some public facilities were vandalized, I think street lights, solar lamps and all the rest of it in Kaduna State. And the report I recall was that when El-Rufai assured the traditional rulers in the area that they will lose their stools, if these things were not recovered, that it all came back. I hope that report is correct. But apart from that instance, there have been several other cases, at least one of them in which I was involved in, and where I say, listen, this area is not no man's land. If the people here cannot find out who and who did what is going on, hold all of them liable, suspend the traditional ruler. The matter was resolved in 3 days. So coming back to the whole notion of national security, we spent a lot on procurement of equipment. As it reflected in the performance of the military, when we were about to procure Tucano helicopters, everybody said that once he comes, Boko Haram will become history. When we bought it, we put it on display at Eagle Square and came to cut the tape. I felt scandalized. You're about to go into a fight with me, And first of all, you put up a performance to show everybody the kind of trick you used to defeat me. And I'm watching also. That's another wretched political gesture that shouldn't exist. And I'm sure you recall the report about 2 months ago now, 3, because it wasn't done under this government, where we were told that the peace we have now on Kaduna Road, and there's no bombing, not much attack, was secured through a 3-month renewable agreement with bandits by the hierarchy of our military leadership. Don't you feel scandalized as a Nigerian? It's in the papers, you can go and verify it. 3 months renewable agreement to stop hostilities with bandits. In other words, you met them and signed the agreement with them. What are you supposed to do to bandits other than take them out? Part of that report also thanked Nigerians who meant well, those who willingly, as well-wishers and supporters of peace, helped in contributing 2.5 billion naira that went into this. What does the military exist to do? This is official communication. Oh, we've secured it by signing. What happened to Katsina State? Masari signed agreements with bandits and the same trouble. Anyway, so that's the point about it. They should have a more holistic, comprehensive approach to national security rather than just focus on budget. The element of budget is an incidental issue in all of that, but they must take it seriously.
You know, these things that you have outlined only brings to mind for me the role or a lack thereof of local government authorities. And that conversation around local government autonomy is still, if you ask me. Having had a stint with local government authorities, I know that they have their own security meetings. They have, as you mentioned, they have traditional rulers, they have religious leaders, they have CDAs, community development associations, that meet at these meetings and ensure that things don't go awry. I also recall that in my own hometown and perhaps a number of other communities, there is right there in the middle of the town, remember the son of whom you are. You get into a community, it is you are strange, you don't look like anyone around, people are asking questions. But today it doesn't seem to be what is in existence. Otherwise, I don't know if we'll be having the same kind of insecurity that we are having, particularly at the local communities now, especially because our security agents tell us, security consultants tell us, all insecurity is local. So in terms of local government autonomy, where would you say we are? Do you think we mean it? Or as Chamberlain cited the other time, we're just tongue-in-cheek about local government autonomy or local government authorities doing the needful?
Well, my initial take is to say that there's no such thing as local government before you talk about its autonomy, or what did you call it again? So there is no such thing, because local government means there's government existing at that level with full spread out activities being carried out and with clear indications of what is achieving every week, every month, every quarter, and every year. What you have are clerical assistants to most governors who occupy the office of local government chairman but have little or no access to their actual budget. In some reported cases, I am not in a position to confirm, but I know somebody who had been in that position claimed that they got some kind of a regular monthly, I won't use the word allowance, sum that is totally at variance with the budget for the area, and that everybody keeps quiet, otherwise the thing is to ship out. So here we are. Governors have security votes, and I'll tell you how a former governor deployed his security votes. When he was sworn in, first of all, he slashed it dramatically, then walked out the 177 local government, town, what do you call them now? Communities in his state, and that's where he shared out the money. He got them patrol vehicles, and he told them this thing you just said. If a stranger walks into your community and you don't know, you are not there. If crime happens here and you say you don't know how it happened, all of you are conspirators. You know yourselves. I am the governor. I can't come here to secure you. I'm not from your village. You're from your village. And so he did that, got them patrol vehicles, made these allowances available to them on a monthly basis, and that's how he secured the state, and that's how the place was managed from the angle of security. That was P2B in Anambra State. So governors, traditional rulers. It's not enough when you say they are holding security town hall meetings. It happens in the state capital. Very important people will come. Most of them will sleep through the session. Total number of people present, probably 500. Their contact with local communities close to zero. And you say, yes, we've held a summit on security in the state. The real Nigerians are not people like you and me. They are in the villages. They don't wear suits. They are not on TV. Go to where they are. Local government chairmen do not exist to drive big cars. They exist to become the cement holding the communities under them together.
But the question that will also
in summary
arise,
and in response to your question, or to sum the response, the point is this. Local government chairmen need to be seen to be doing something as autonomous and independent and effective components of public governance.
Okay. Well, there are those who will also speak to the legality or otherwise of local government autonomy, or, as you said, local government existence in the first place. So, Dr. Bani, speak to that, because this conversation around local governments being autonomous, local government being a tier of government altogether is not even existent in the first place. There are those who are wondering, look, as Prof said, local governments are just administrative units. But I was part of the Third Republic, and I saw how actively the local governments were trying to ensure good governance in their areas. I could almost not even hear the name of the governor at the time. The local governments were very active. Particularly, I recall Mushin local government, Akpakpa local government, and Lagos Island local government. They even had their own businesses spread all over the city. So, do we have a constitutionally guaranteed local government system or not?
That's a very beautiful question. There is a court case that I have in Abuja against all the state governors that refuse to conduct election into local government administration. And immediately I filed a suit. Most of them rushed and held what you call an election. There was no real election. It's like appointing caretaker committee chairman that they were doing prior to that court case. What is going on today, Ayo, is something that should make Nigerians to gather in a national stadium and begin to mourn and cry, you know, over the evil that has actually fallen over the land. The issue of joint state account that the Constitution of 1999 made a mistake in putting into the Constitution, but it was for a good reason. That money comes from the federal allocation into that state account. Then the state also bring their own counterpart and put into that particular account. And then local government administrators are allowed to administer the local government in accordance with the Constitution, because they have a role that the Constitution itself has assigned. But from 1999 till date, well, 1999, there was some semblance of local government administration that was allowed, because I remember that there was a local government chairman called Keso Baja in my own local government in Kwano. I remember that the transformers were giving water, borehole. We are giving in local government in villages in my local government under Ojos Okano's administration. But after some time, in second tenure of Ojos Okano, they started now to tamper with the money that was coming to local government. They will ask them, maybe they have 50 million. They ask them to sign that they have received that 50 million. After signing, they just give them 5 million. 45, so that these guys knew that this is a honey pie.
Okay.
And they have sat on it for many years, up to now, including all the states. There's no state that is exculpated. All of them are guilty. All of them.
Let's wind down with this, and if you make it brief, it will be appreciated. The governors have just come back from their retreats in Kigali. Shouldn't we expect at least a better manifestation or an improved manifestation of democratic ethos from the governors? Prof, let me start with you.
Let's not kid ourselves. That's all I will say to that question. Because, see, no matter how much you feed a cat, it will not become a lion. It's a cat. The earthworm crawls. The anaconda and python crawls. But the earthworm is not a species of anaconda. It's an earthworm. So when you're not primed for leadership and you go to Kigali and receive lectures, part of the time, in fact, most of the time, you're either lounging or you're doing shopping, you have your Easter code. because you made a trip and came back. Number one, there's no proof anything is. Number two, assuming it's really for training on leadership, the question is, should they have gone? Don't we have in the country enough institutions to deal with that, for which even foreigners come? So let's not this. They could have gone to NIPS for that. They could have come to the Nigerian Army Resource Center for that. There are several institutions. So without questioning the fact that there's value in the trip, if anybody is expecting dramatic performance as outcome of that trip, the person must ask himself, the individuals involved, look at the number of trainings they've had since they've been in public office and measure their performance after such trainings against their overall performance in office.
And nobody's against training. But when you waste our scarce resources in going to a country that you are better than that country, it is something, again, we should...
Are we better than?
We are better than Rwanda, for God's sake, in terms of indicators. You know, economic indicators, but, you know, we are better than... There are beautiful places, there are even beautiful institutions that can train our nation. Now, leadership. If by now we don't know what we need as a nation before you become a governor, then you should go and cry.
All right, gentlemen, we thank you for coming on. Dr. Mando Bani, former chairman, section on public interest and development at SPDL for the MBA, and Professor Oke Ikechukwu, executive director, Development Specs Academy. Thank you both for coming on this morning.